Welcome to the Mentor Lab, a space where we talk honestly about what it means to show up for young people who've experienced trauma, foster care, or instability. Each episode, we sit down with youth, mentors, and professionals to explore real stories, hard topics, and the moments that remind us why mentorship matters. I'm your host, Natalie Lawrence, and today with us, we have Dr. Greg Manning. We will be talking through transitional-age youth and understanding their traumatic backgrounds. So let's welcome Dr. Greg Manning to the Mentor Lab podcast. Hi, Dr. Greg Manning. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Can we start by you just giving your bio? Kind of tell us what you do and how you got to the point of talking about this.
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in California, and I provide services to youth in foster care and young adults and who have been in foster care as well as their families and caregivers. In both, I've been in both public settings and private settings in terms of organizations like that. So it's what I've been doing for the past 30 years. I started, right out of graduate school, and when I got my doctorate, and started working with youth in a group home, and started working there, and a lot of different opportunities. I came down here to Orange County about 25 years ago or so, and been working in different public and private agencies supporting our youth in foster care. And it's just a real passion that I have. And so looking forward to talking about more about it with you today.
I love that. Thank you for what you do. So grateful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just jump right in.
Sure.
Talking about trauma.
Right.
Really easy stuff. How does trauma typically show up in transitional youth who have experienced foster care?
I think the way I look at trauma is an event that overwhelms the individual's ability to make sense of it. And I think if we start at that basic level, then what we want to look at is, when do we see actions and behaviors that don't make sense given the situation? So if you stub your toe, it's like, ow, but it shouldn't be a big explosion and a big, like that too. So I think really what happens for our youth is that situations almost universally can cause them to have exaggerated responses.
Okay.
And so I think that's really, what I look at is that when I think about trauma and trauma responses is it could be what we would consider a normal life situation. It could be someone cutting you off on the freeway, or someone calling you a bad name. And then instead of going, oh, I don't like that, or that hurts, and we can manage that. A lot of times our youth and especially our young adults who have been in foster care, they don't have that ability to put the pause on and the slow down. They essentially don't have brakes. I think that's a good way to look at it, is that their gas goes and then someone pushes them and they can't slow down.
Okay. That's a really good visual. I remember in some marriage counseling learning, when the reaction doesn't match the infraction,
right,
is when there are other layers there.
Right.
And I've kind of liked that as a rule of thumb.
No, and I think building off that too, Natalie, the idea that the way I look at their actions can be very big and kind of scary and like tough to deal with. The way I look at it is that, we don't want to condone those actions, right? Because no matter what's happened in your life, you can't just react however you want. At the same time, especially since we know what's happened in their life, we can't condemn them for their actions. So we have to sit in this middle space between not condoning their actions, which are negative and bad, but also not condemning the individual. And that's really where I think with the mentoring has to sit in that middle space where we help them make sense of it, and so that their reactions aren't as bad as they were, but also that they see themselves and other people see themselves as much better people than just their actions.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. Not like you are not what you're doing.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's jump into that a little bit deeper, because even before we started recording, we were talking about this, how sometimes mentors, it's hard to not come in wanting to fix a young person and seeing this trauma response, like, oh, I want to fix them, I want to save them.
Right.
How can mentors not do that? What's the correct way to then come alongside?
No, and especially when you come at it from a faith-based lens that even enhances that sense of wanting to save them, because you see where their path could go and you see if they can turn things around and how their path could be so much better. And yet it's a lot of it similar to like with parenting, how when your children or even young people that you may be around, if they ask you a question, you could give them an answer. But the problem is they don't learn really from that. They just get your answer and then move on. And so I think what we really want to do is come alongside them and say, if they ask me a question like, hey, Dr. Manning, what should I do in this situation? I'm like, I don't know, but let us find out. And in that whole phrase, the us part is what matters. Because if they could figure it out by themselves, they would. If they figure it out only because of what you tell them, then you have to be in their lives 24/7 in order to solve all their issues. So there has to be a spot between you give them all their answers and them figuring it out on their own. And the mentoring is that us part in the middle, where you say, let us figure that out together. And then you can help them bounce some ideas off of them, as opposed to just, give them answers or expecting them to figure it out themselves.
That's so good. So a lot of being in the middle.
It is, and being in the middle is tough, right? Because we want to kind of, be either this or that, and we even see in today's society, it's either this or that, good or bad, and yet it's that space in the middle, which is really where the tough work happens, but also where the real blessings start happening there too.
Yeah. So emotional safety,
Right.
What does that exactly mean? And how does a young person perceive emotional safety?
Yeah, I think emotional safety is really the idea that I can be who I need to be in that moment, whatever that is. If I need to be happy, I need to be that. I need to be sad, I need to be angry, but that whatever my emotion is does not equate with what my value is. And I think really, especially with our youth in foster care and young adults who have been in foster care, they haven't had that good modeling of what proper emotions are and how to manage them.
Okay.
And so, because you think about it, if they had been exposed to healthy, loving, supporting family environments, they wouldn't have been in foster care in the first place. And so they haven't learned that. So some of their mentors, their models, their parents and other folks were unable to provide them with a safe and stable living environment. So that's why they're in foster care. So I think what we really want to look at is they're not used to emotional safety. So they're almost used to chaos. So sometimes they actually may create chaos.
Okay.
And we label that as sabotaging. It's not sabotaging, it's approaching something that feels normal. And so I think that's what we really want to look at, is like their sense of normalcy is instability. And so our goal of moving them towards emotional safety and stability is going to be a journey.
Okay.
It's just like with learning any new task or new strategy. It's like, it's not going to be overnight. It's not just going to be a download. Like our phones can download a new app and it's there, right? We're not like that. And we're also dealing with someone who's been journeying like this for 10, 15, 20 years. And then suddenly we come into their lives as a mentor and we can't expect it just to like flip the switch and become really safe overnight. So.
That's so interesting that the norm would be chaos.
Sure.
And so that actually might feel comfortable, even though that's not actually safe. They're not experiencing it safe, even if it might be more comfortable.
Right, because ultimately with that's the way the brain was wired. So our brains are based on what is normal to us, based on what our normal experience is. So for me, I'm very used to the English language because that's what I'm usually exposed to. But if I go to the Philippines and hear Tagalog, I'm like, it's very unsettling to me because I have no idea what's being said. I don't know if someone's angry or happy or if that's good or bad because I don't have any context for it. But so then with our youth though, they're used to instability. They're used to people coming in and out of their lives. They're used to things being very unstable and very conditional. Like if I'm good, the person stays in my life. If I'm bad, they leave. So really, I think in the mentor relationship can be very challenging to create and navigate because they're not used to someone coming along just to be with them. And I think really ultimately when you talk about it's not saving them, it's about being with them. And that's how where they grow, that's where they begin to improve, is when you're willing to be with them no matter where they're at. So I think that's really on the
So good. Okay, so just zeroing in a little bit more even on that emotional instability.
Right.
And so how can a mentor come alongside someone who is, maybe needs to learn how to be able to just be angry or just be sad or be happy? Like, what does that exactly look like?
No, I think the big thing is assuming that that they're angry, they're sad, is not the same as yours necessarily. So really what the goal is really to see learn from them, like, what are some of your feelings? And some of that might be even new for them. Because really, if you think about it, if a child with a healthy parent gets hurt, the parent comes to them, soothes them, and because the parent knows instinctively that they're sad or angry or scared. But remember, they haven't had, our youth in care have not had that. So they're not even used to someone just sitting with us. Sometimes the most emotional safety you can provide for them is literally just sitting near them, maybe as close as us. Maybe they don't want you sitting next to them. Maybe they don't want you touching them, because that may not be safe for them. So really, I think it is asking them, how would you like me to be with you? And also they're reading their cues. If they start tensing up, then pause and go, I'll be right here. And eventually, you'll begin to read the cues more. And also they'll also be able to be more directive for you. Like, I would like you to do this. And that's also in other relationships. Like, I like to solve my wife's problems, and like, I'm getting better at pause and just accepting where she's at and that too. And so I think that's really that goal is reading their cues, and also not assuming that they're going to act in the same way that you would or that you have in your past.
Yeah. I imagine that there are times where their emotions could make the mentor feel really nervous too.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like what you're saying is the kinds of cues you're paying attention to aren't even necessarily their body language.
Right.
And helping them maybe by asking them, how would you like me to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And also just realizing that sometimes the best thing you can do is just be quiet and be silent with them. And really not solve anything, just to be with them. Because if you think about it, if they're in pain and they're in distress, the last thing they want is to be left alone. But like you said, sometimes their actions may cause it to be uncomfortable for people to be with them. And if you can just get past that your own insecurity, your own uncomfortableness, you can actually begin to say, they're like, wait a minute, I didn't scare her away. And stuff like that. And so I think, that's also making sure that we come into space with them with our own stuff managed as well as we can. So if we're on edge, if we're stressed out, we need to kind of, center ourselves and then move into space with them. But I think it's that dance. You're dancing, you're playing back and forth like ping pong, going back and forth, and eventually you start synchronizing with them, and that's really when you're going to see their mentoring relationship take off.
That's a really cool kind of visual of seeing how all of a sudden you're going to see these glimpses of synchronizing together.
Right.
And okay, so practically, not that I want to go too on the negative side, but what are some helpful phrases and what are some harmful phrases that a mentor could be using as they're engaging with the young person?
I think one of the best things you can do is not say that I understand. Which sounds somewhat counterintuitive because we like to be understood. But if I say to you, you like 2 + 2 is 4, you understand that. So we never have to have that conversation ever again. But if you say, that made me sad, Dr. Manning, and I say, I understand that, what I'm telling you is that there's nothing more I can learn from you. But what I like to say, and I used to say that early on in my career, is like, I understand. I used to give my clients lots of answers, and they were good answers. And a lot of times they worked. But I quickly figured out, but they're my answers to their questions. And so when I say I understand, what I'm saying is I can't learn from you. But what I like to say is, I can only imagine what that's like. Can you share more? Because what we want to do in a relationship is build a sense of curiosity. Because we've been around people who just want to get past it. Like we've got a server at a restaurant. They know, the ones who want to get to know you and get to learn from you, and the ones that just want to get your order and move on to the next table. The ones who want to get to know you, you have a relationship with them. And because they get to, so you went to the ball game. They see that you're wearing a jersey. Oh, so how'd the game go and whatever. But I think really with our kids, what we want to do is create a sense of curiosity about them. Because imagine how powerful it is when someone goes, I'm curious about you. I'd like to learn from you and with you, because that also shows that they have something to give.
Yeah.
And with our kids in foster care and young adults, they've had things taken away from them, but they've also not been granted any value. Because what good are they? But you have, in your mentoring relationship, you have the opportunity to say, you know what, I'd like to learn from you and with you. So tell me more about that. So how is it that leads you to feel scared? So I think really what we want to do is create curiosity, because that's really what we live for. And then also, people light up when they can tell their story and share about themselves. So I think that's one of the big things is sense of curiosity, not saying that you understand, and also avoiding the temptation to give them an answer. And they may ask you, so what should I do? And again, it goes back to what I said before. I'm not sure, but let us figure it out. Let's go walk along that. Let's explore some ideas. Let's bounce some ideas. So if you can be more of a ball wall than an answer wall, I think it can be very helpful in that regard.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sort of becomes a little more exciting, a little more fun and less stressful as a mentor to say, I'm just going to be a really good learner, really curious, really good question asker. I don't actually have to know anything. No. I don't have to have any answers.
No.
That's actually really freeing and maybe even a little more exciting.
It is. And for me, I've been blessed with not having any personal experience within the foster care realm. And so I think that really, for me, it forces me to be a learner because I haven't walked their walk. I've walked alongside a lot of them over the last 3 decades, and I feel that's a blessing. But it also says, like, I have so much more to learn. And I think that's really what is when we enter into a relationship with a sense of what can I learn versus what can I give, then what answers can I give? It really frees them up too, because suddenly imagine wow, I taught my mentor something today.
That's cool.
It's a gift.
Them feeling like they have something to give is that's such a beautiful thing. Yeah, I wonder how often, I'd like your thoughts on this, how often people group foster youth in one, rather than thinking if I know one person in foster youth, I know one person in foster youth. Sure. Not if I know one, I understand them all.
Right.
They each have different stories, and do you experience that?
No, it is. And I think even within sibling sets, they're also very different. I have 4 children, and even I have 2 identical twins, and they're radically different from each other, even though they share all the same DNA and they've been in the same household with the same parents their entire life. And so if that situation is not identical, how can these situations be? And I think, but also part of what's unique to foster care is not just what happened to them, but how they experienced it. And who was around them when they experienced it. It's easier, I think, for a mentor to connect with someone, with a youth who's had other supportive adults in their life. But really, if you're especially starting a new mentoring relationship, you really have to be aware of who has been in their life. What has their experience been like with other adults? Because maybe they've had other mentors who had one outburst and the mentor never came back. They had ones, or they promised them all this and then they never delivered on it. So part of that is really, it goes back to learning from them, and learning with them. And also, if they are in foster care, not trusting all the reports that are said as that's one person's version of the truth. It's just like when you read the newspaper, you could go into a baseball game and then read the newspaper and or the article or the online. That wasn't my experience of that baseball game, but that was theirs. And so I think really it goes back to they're all unique individuals, and they all have unique gifts that really the mentor's calling is to find those and to bring them out.
Yeah. For some reason, my mind is going to my daughter who just turned 1. She's had some strange crawling patterns.
Sure.
And I just took her to physical therapy today. And what the therapist said was that she has these patterns that just keeps getting reinforced.
Right.
So I'm just thinking how interesting that a mentor, by the time that these mentors are actually meeting with these young adults, they're older. So thinking of some of these patterns that have been ingrained since they were a baby, really. Right. And you see that's also not going to be overnight. That's going to be, those are patterns that have been reinforced for a long time.
Right.
And how much that can become norm is, I think, interesting.
No, it is. And I think also what's realized is their responses are survival strategies. Unlike your daughter, her responses are just responses to her environment.
Yeah.
And they can be shaped, and yet our youth, though, their responses are survival strategies. Because that's one thing with trauma is that it's not just that the experience is overwhelming, but their absolute existence is at threat. And the difficult thing with youth in foster care, especially when they don't have those unconditional supports around them, is that their life is always perceived to be at threat. They could be in a home with 3 meals and bed and everything, and yet they still feel like their lives are at threat. And so what happens is that everything is a threat to them, so they respond that way. And so I think that's the real challenge, is that, and when you begin to get underneath that, when they no longer see you as a threat and they no longer see you as someone who's trying to get them or get something out of them, and just to be someone who wants to be with them, that's when they can begin to let their guard down.
Yeah.
Because again, and you're going to notice that when they start calming down, they're going to start slowing down, they're going to start sharing more. They may share feelings and thoughts before the actions happen, as opposed to, and so I think that's really what it is our goal is to have them to reduce that threat level, so that their survival is not at risk. Because the reality is, no matter what their behaviors are, they've been successful.
Yeah.
And we know that because they're still alive. All survival strategies, our brains are hardwired into keeping all survival strategies going. Whether they're functional or not in society is a different story, because everything our kids have done has helped keep them alive. The problem is, when they're around supported people like a mentor, they continue those behaviors because that's all they've ever known. And so the challenge is then, how do we help them to begin calm down, to be safe, and to be emotionally like, wait, like Natalie's not threatening me.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have to respond that way. So that's when the blessings really start happening, is when they no longer see you as a threat.
Yeah, that's great. That makes total sense. Okay, let's go to some practical things then. So grounding techniques.
Right.
What are some grounding techniques? What does that even mean? What is grounding that mentors can use with their young people?
I think grounding ultimately has to start with us. And I think sometimes we're like, oh, we've got it all together. Maybe, and maybe at that moment you do, but I think really grounding is really, part of it is the, like a spiritual grounding, like, if you're spiritual, like, you pray for a moment, just pause and pray for a moment, like, bless me in this moment, right? And if you're not spiritual, that's, like, all right, just pause, and one of the best things we can do, no matter what, is breathe. It's amazing how our brains do so much better with oxygen. I mean, it sounds like redundant, but it's like, that's why. And so, and one thing is also important, whenever we fly, and most of us ignore the safety briefings at the beginning, but they say when the pressure cabin decreases, the oxygen masks are going to drop from the ceiling. But what's the instruction that we assume we should do? If we're with a child, if you're with your daughter, what would your instinct be?
Yeah, I'd want to get it on her first.
Right. The problem is you're going to pass out. So you're not going to be of any help to the child. So the instructions put the mask on ourselves first, so that we can be there for the people who depend on us. And so really grounding, we have to be grounded first in order for us to be a potential for grounding for our youth. And so really, I think a lot of it is breathing. And also one of the best things is slowing down. It's amazing how when we start seeing a challenge, we start speeding up and like, slow down. Right. And the other thing with grounding is not having an agenda, not having a checklist of these are the 5 things we need to accomplish in our mentoring session today, because you don't know how that youth is showing up. Right. And so I think that's really part of it, is centering yourself and also just being present for the child wherever they're at. You could have a plan, you're going to go see a movie and all that stuff. Maybe they just want to sit on a park bench and just sit there. That could be the best opportunity for them as well. So I think it's a both and. It's both us first, and then also being present for them wherever they're at.
Yeah. And that could be hard for a mentor to think, like, I'm not going to fill the silences all the time.
No.
Where it's like, just even like, I wonder if that would be a good metric for success, is if you as a mentor went in and out of the meeting, like taking deep breaths and being calm.
Yes.
And then the mentee was able to just be with a calm person for an hour or whatever it is.
You're modeling for them.
Yeah.
When you're breathing, they're breathing.
Yeah.
When you're slowing down, they start to slow down. But And I think also the thing is, get rid of our agendas, because sometimes just spending time with people is the blessing itself. Not what you did, but just that you were together. Because remember, our youth aren't used to having a lot of people who just want to be with them.
Yeah.
And you know what? You may have bought tickets for something and you're not going to the show. Okay? But did the youth benefit from your time together? That your goal should be, how does the child benefit from our time together? Not whether we accomplish A, B, C, and D.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The word resilience.
Right.
I love. How can we help build, emotional resilience,
right.
But however you want to take that question, how can we help build resilience in our mentees?
Yeah, I think resilience is interesting. It's definitely a great skill to have, the ability to bounce back from adversity, the ability to not be devastated by it. I think the biggest thing for me is, and it goes back to mentoring too, is when I look at success overall, success is not whether the outcome was positive or negative. Success is whether I learned from it or not. Because if I have an experience that was successful and I don't learn from it, that's luck. And I can't replicate luck. But also, if I had a situation that there was a negative outcome, but I learned why, then I'm not going to repeat that mistake. And so when you think about resilience is really only a benefit if you actually learn from your experience, not from whether you bounce back or not. Because if you bounce back and get beaten down, bounce back and be down, bounce back and be down, there's really no upside to that because you're not learning. But if you realize, hey, if I go down this hallway, something's bad is going to happen, the resilient blessing is when you go down a different hallway. Or go down a different path. So I think really, and again, we don't know what resilience means for our youth necessarily, because again, it's their path. But really for me is, I want them to learn from their experience. And so when I think of resiliency, I want that to be resilient in a positive direction because they're learning, not because they're just bouncing back, and getting beaten down again. And you think about relationships, that's really where the mentor relationship, we need to be resilient in the relationship because they're going to test us. They're going to push because remember, they're used to people leaving their lives. They're used to people letting them down. So if we are resilient in our mentoring relationship, that's when we keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up. But I've had youth say, Dr. Manning, why the heck do you keep coming back? Like, I treat you like crap. And they use some other colorful language, which we'll save for today. But they say, I'm like, you know what? Because I enjoy being with you. They're like, why? I'm like, I just find you fascinating. I learn new things with you every day. They're like, but that doesn't make sense to them. But it will over time. And that's why, again, I think when we think of resiliency, we think of our youth. But the mentors, they need to be resilient because they need to keep showing up. And then once they keep showing up, the youth is going to, there's something different about this person. And they'll start disclosing more and more. And ultimately, what we want, though, is whatever they find in us they like, we want to find that in other people in their lives. Because we're not permanent in their life. We're not unconditional in their lives. Unless we bring them into our homes and families, we're only a piece of their puzzle. So we want them to learn from us and then take that and find other relationships which mirror ours, but then can go to that next level.
That's so cool about that learning piece. So is that, because sometimes, like if I were to just, point blank look at a young person who's gone through foster youth, the system, and then I'm thinking they are resilient because they have made it, they've made it. But that dynamic of have they learned to learn from that, from bouncing back? That feels like a big distinction. I have not heard that before.
It is. And I think that especially once they become adults, because in the end, after they become adults, the foster care system, in large part, the legal obligations reduce significantly. And their legal obligations increase for the young adult significantly. Because if you have a situation that you do a certain behavior and the police get involved, you can't say I was in foster care and they're like, okay, that's fine. And they just let you go. they're going to be held accountable for that. So the problem is some of what they learned early on as survival strategies can end up haunting them as an adult.
Okay.
Because they have to pay the price for all of that.
It doesn't work in adulthood.
It doesn't work in adulthood.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some people in your life who are compassionate, and that's wonderful. But for our youth, also, the fact is there are going to be people in their lives who aren't that compassionate. And they can't act the way they may act with you as a mentor, like with other people. I say, like with my youth that I worked in young adults, I said, you can act with me however you want. But there's 3 classes of people that I really can't do that with. It's your boss, your landlord, and the authorities. Because if you act that way towards your boss, you get fired. You act that way towards your landlord, you get evicted. And if you act that way towards the authority, you get arrested. And those are 3 outcomes our young adults have a really hard time bouncing back from.
Okay.
And so really for what I look at that is their learning is how do we learn you to honestly acknowledge your emotions and then choose a different behavior. And that begins in the mentoring relationship. But also it can't stay there. We have to help that transfer of learning happen. Like take it from here and go out. Just like with your daughter with the physical therapy. She just can't do that there. She has to do that at home. She has to do that in other situations. So that learning has to transfer.
Yeah.
And that's really where the mentoring sees, where the blessing for the mentors when you see them making decisions on their own and they come back and celebrate with you. Like, hey, guess what? I was at my work and this customer cussed me out and I said, I'm sorry that you didn't have a good experience. How can we make it better? Like, wow, that's awesome. Because in the past, I would have cussed at them back and I would have got fired. And then you would have been unemployed. And then you would have lost your housing. And then you would have, and so that's the real blessing that they see is that learning. So
that's cool. Yeah. Well, it's so cool to hear like a doctor of psychology have such reverence for mentorship.
Right.
It sounds like mentorship you see is so valuable. So sort of in closing, are there any last encouragements or anything you really want to encourage mentors with?
I think first and foremost, celebrate the calling that you've said yes to, because everyone isn't called to be a mentor. And the fact that you were called to be a mentor and that you said yes, celebrate that. People in your life may not understand why. They may go, why are you doing that? Again, that doesn't matter for them, but really celebrate your calling, but also realize that your goal is to walk alongside them. I remember when I was a parent with young kids, can I help you make breakfast? I'm like, we know that breakfast is going to take longer, it's going to be messier, and the pancakes aren't going to taste as good probably. But when you see the magic in your child's eyes when you're eating the pancakes that they help make, it makes all the difference in their world. And they'll tell everybody, and you'll tell everybody the pancakes were awesome. That's what we want with our youth. With your mentorship, the gift you bring is your presence, not your answers, not your connections, not your tickets to the shows or whatever. Your gift is your presence. That's the blessing you bring into their life. And that presence can be difficult at times. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. But if you can be resilient and you can learn from things that set your youth off, stop doing those things and apologize. Hey, I'm sorry for doing that. I had one youth who I put my hand on their shoulder. They said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I threatened you in that way. I didn't mean to threaten them, but my actions were taken as a threat. So I need to learn from that. So I learned not to put my hand on them. Right. And so that's the blessing is, again, come to embrace your calling, think your calling, but also then realize, come alongside them and mentor and be with them and without solving their issues. And that's the blessing. Because when you see them launch and be successful on their own, and they come back to celebrate you, that's when you know that your mentoring has made a difference.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for coming on and sharing all your expertise.
I had a great time. Thank you so much.
So good. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if these conversations resonate with you, leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts and what questions you'd like us to explore in future episodes. Lastly, help us grow our community and share this episode with your family, friends, life groups, and more. We're grateful you've chosen to be a part of this mission, one rooted in hope, compassion, and the belief that every young person deserves to be seen, supported, and loved. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for stepping into this journey with us.